His mind raced as he searched through the reports. The energy signatures from the Earth fleet were unlike anything he had ever encountered. It wasn't just advanced propulsion systems that the humans had perfected. There was something else. Something buried beneath the surface of the planet. Zirek's suspicion grew. Earth wasn't just playing catch-up. They had been hiding their true capabilities from the galaxy, waiting for the right moment to strike. Impossible, Zirek muttered, almost to himself. How could we have missed this? In the chaos of the moment, Zirek's mind flickered back to the Council's earlier dismissals of Earth. They had underestimated them. They had laughed at them. But now they had made a grave mistake, and it was one they would pay for dearly. Status report. He barked at the officer closest to him. The officer quickly complied, his voice strained with tension. Sire, we're seeing strange fluctuations in the energy field around Earth. The ships, they're getting ready to fire. Zirek's eyes widened. Firing? What are they firing with? The officer's face drained of color as he looked at the screen. We don't know, sire. We can't detect what kind of weapons they're using. But the energy, it's massive. A cold sweat broke out across Zirek's forehead. The weight of what was happening began to sink in. This wasn't just an isolated incident. Earth was preparing for something big. Something that could potentially shift the balance of power in the galaxy. The officer continued, his voice almost a whisper. Sire, the fleet is taking position. They're forming up. It looks like they're preparing for a coordinated strike. Zirek's mind raced. This can't be happening. The idea of a primitive species launching a successful attack against the Empire was unthinkable. They were supposed to be the dominant force in the galaxy. They had built their empire on the strength of their technology, their warships, their sheer might. Earth should have been nothing more than a blip on their radar, a speck of dust in the vastness of space. But this was something else. He turned to the communications officer. Get me the human fleet commander. Now. The officer quickly input commands, but the usual smooth communication channels didn't respond. The officer cursed under his breath and tried again. But the line was dead. There was no response. Zirek's fist slammed into the console in frustration. What's happening? The officer scrambled to check the systems. Sire, their communications are jammed. Whatever they're using, it's cutting off all our transmissions. We can't get through. A sense of urgency filled the room. The Empire had always been able to communicate with ease. Their systems flawless. Their ships always within reach. But now, they were cut off, isolated. And Earth was about to unleash something they couldn't even detect. Zirek's mind whirled. What could they be hiding? What have they been preparing for all this time? We need to strike first, Zirek said, his voice low and dangerous. We can't wait any longer. The longer we hesitate, the more dangerous this becomes. He turned to Lakar, who had just returned from the fleet. The commander's face was grim, his eyes full of the same realization that had struck Zirek earlier. Sire, the fleet is ready. We can launch an attack now. Zirek nodded, his face hardening. Do it. Lakar turned and began issuing orders. The Empire's fleet began to position itself, their massive warships gathering around the dark edges of space, preparing to strike at the heart of Earth. But even as Zirek watched the preparations unfold, a sense of dread gnawed at him. Earth's response had been swift, their ships so much larger than they had expected, and now, with their communications cut off, it was as though they were playing into Earth's hands. As the fleet prepared to launch, Zirek felt a sudden, chilling shift. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Something in the air had changed. And then, it hit him. A massive energy pulse, far beyond anything he had ever felt, surged across the space between them and Earth. It was as though Earth had just thrown a gauntlet down, a challenge that said, "We will not bow. We will not surrender." The first blast hit, not directly, but it was enough to send a shockwave rippling through the Empire's defenses. Zirek stumbled back, his heart racing. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice rising with panic. The officer at the console could barely breathe. "It's a weapon, sire. A direct energy strike. And it's coming from the human fleet. The Council had made their move, and Earth was ready. Zirek's mind reeled. The first battle had begun, and they had no idea what they were up against. The shock wave from the first energy pulse reverberated across the chamber, shaking the very foundations of the Empire's ship. Zirek steadied himself, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched the screen in front of him flicker and blur. The human fleet was making their move, and the Empire was already on the defensive. "What happened to our shields?" Zirek demanded, his voice barely containing his rage. The officer at the control panel was frantically inputting commands, his fingers trembling. "Our shields are intact, sire, but the energy from the pulse, it bypassed them. It's like nothing we've seen before. The system can't process it. It's too advanced." Zirek's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just a standard weapon. This was something else. Earth wasn't using conventional methods. They were tapping into something beyond the scope of the Empire's understanding. Lakar, who had just returned from the fleet, entered the room, his face grim. "Sire, we've lost contact with our outer fleet. The communication jamming is still in effect. We can't reach the front lines." Zirek's hands clenched into fists. "Get me their commander. We can't waste time. I need to know what's happening out there." Lakar hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Sire, it's not just the communications. They've deployed something we haven't seen before. It's a field, a kind of gravitational distortion. It's pulling ships out of position. We can't maneuver properly." Zirek's face darkened as the weight of the situation sank in. The human fleet was outclassing them at every turn. The Empire, with all its advanced weaponry, was being neutralized by a species they had once dismissed as primitive. "Then we need to change tactics," Zirek said, his voice low and cold. "I want every fleet ship on high alert. No more holding back. If they want to fight, we'll give them one." Lakar nodded and turned to relay the orders to the fleet. As he left, Zirek returned his focus to the screen. Earth's ships, massive, sleek, and cloaked, were beginning to form a tighter formation. The pulse had been a warning, and now they were preparing for something far worse. "Report," Zirek barked at the officers around him. "Energy levels on the human ships are rising," one officer said, his eyes wide with fear. "They're about to fire again." Zirek stood still, his mind racing. This was no longer about a single battle. This was about survival. The Empire had underestimated Earth in the worst way possible, and now they were paying the price. Every moment they hesitated, Earth grew stronger, and worse, smarter. Whatever hidden technology the humans had been harboring, it was more advanced than anything the Empire had ever seen. The officer continued. "The distortion field is expanding. It's becoming more difficult to track their movements. They're using some form of cloaking we've never encountered." Zirek gritted his teeth. "Damn them, they've been hiding this from us, hiding everything." The officers exchanged nervous glances. The Empire was on the edge of losing control, and Earth was slowly but surely taking the upper hand. Inside the cold metallic walls of the alien council chamber, an air of superiority hung thick. The Empire had watched Earth for centuries, watched as the primitive humans scurried about, unaware of the vastness of the cosmos. They had laughed when Earth's response to the Empire's summons was delayed. It had taken weeks for the humans to even acknowledge their presence. Weeks of silence, broken only by the static hum of alien technology and the faint whispers of a civilization far superior. "Sire," said Zirek, his voice a deep rumble that resonated across the chamber. His dark eyes gleamed with a sense of inevitable triumph. Their delay was expected, weak, predictable. The council members nodded in agreement, their postures dismissive. Alien species had long outgrown their need for patience with lesser worlds. Earth was no different from the countless others the Empire had encountered. Backward, underdeveloped, nothing more than a nuisance. Zirek's gaze swept over the panel of monitors displaying Earth's feeble defenses. Their technology was laughable, their military forces even more so. It had been amusing to watch their primitive weapons fire against a force that could obliterate them in an instant. The Empire's invasion would be swift, Easy, even. Why even bother? And Carr, one of the higher-ranking council members, snickered. We've waited centuries for their response, and this is all we get? Pathetic. Zirek's lips curled into a smile, his satisfaction evident. Yes, they'll come around eventually, they always do. But as the council members laughed, an officer entered the chamber, his movements hurried, his expression strained. He bowed slightly, his voice trembling as he spoke. "Sire," he said, his tone shaking. "The sensors, they're picking up unusual readings. Something's happening." Zirek's brow furrowed. "What kind of readings?" The officer's eyes flicked nervously between the screens and the council. We can't pinpoint it. It's like the atmosphere is changing. There's a buildup of energy, and the ships, sire, they're appearing on all sides of the planet." Zirek's amusement vanished. "What are you talking about? There are no ships near Earth. Their fleets are mere scraps compared to ours." The officer swallowed, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "We thought so too. But these readings, they don't match anything in our database. The energy signatures are..." Suddenly the main screen flickered, and the officer's words were cut off. An image of Earth appeared. Zirek's heart stilled. The planet, once so insignificant, now seemed to pulse with the promise of something greater. And then it happened. The skies above Earth darkened as if a shadow had descended from the heavens. From the depths of space, ships began to materialize, slowly at first, but then more rapidly, hundreds, thousands, filling the space around the planet. "What is this?" Zirek demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. The officer hesitated. We don't know. Another officer, one who had been monitoring the frequency, stepped forward. "Sire, these ships are unlike anything we've seen. They're cloaked, and their technology..." He stopped, visibly shaken. "It's beyond anything we've encountered. Their weapons, their propulsion, even their cloaking technology, it's advanced, too advanced." The chamber fell silent. The council's initial smugness began to dissipate, replaced by confusion and fear. Zirek clenched his fists, anger bubbling to the surface. "This is impossible. Earth is nothing more than a primitive world. They cannot have this kind of technology." But the data did not lie. The ships, each one enormous in size and power, were gathering above Earth. The light from the planet's surface reflected off their sleek, dark surfaces, almost as if they were daring the Empire to challenge them. "Impossible," Zirek muttered again, his voice shaking. "How did they do this?" Another officer spoke up, his voice tight. "We have a transmission coming through. It's human. I can't stop it." Zirek's eyes narrowed. "Put it through." The screen flickered again, and a voice crackled through. The speakers. The words were distorted, but they carried a weight of certainty. "A threat." "You mocked us," the voice said, its tone calm, almost disinterested. "Now you'll burn with our fire." The words sent a chill through the chamber. The arrogance of the Empire had always been their greatest weapon, but now it was their greatest vulnerability. Zirek's eyes widened, disbelief written across his. First, before he could speak, the ship's transmission cut off. The atmosphere around Earth seemed to shift. The ships, now fully visible, formed a tight formation, surrounding the planet like a noose. The officer who had first noticed the anomaly stepped forward again. "Sire, there's something else. These ships, they're emitting a signal too powerful to block. They're calling for reinforcements." Zirek's hands clenched into fists. "No." Another transmission came through. This time the words were clearer. "We told you we are Earth, and you'll regret underestimating us." The transmission cut out, leaving nothing but a lingering silence in the chamber. For the first time in the Council's history, they felt it, the weight of their arrogance crashing down on them. Zirek stood motionless, staring at the screen as the ships around Earth flickered with energy. He could feel the change in the air, the palpable tension. The galaxy had miscalculated. Earth was not the primitive species they thought it to be. Earth was not weak. It was the Empire's worst nightmare. And they were about to learn that the hard way. The alien council chamber, once brimming with confidence, now felt like a tomb. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of their advanced machinery. The last transmission from Earth still hung in the air, its chilling message echoing through the minds of every council member. We are Earth, and you'll regret underestimating us. Zirek's eyes darted across the room. Panic had taken root in every corner, spreading like wildfire. The officers who had once stood tall in their superiority were now fidgeting, their hands trembling as they scanned their consoles for answers. Their once unshakable confidence in their empire's dominance had been shattered in an instant. "What do we do?" one of the officers asked, his voice tight, barely audible. Zirek gritted his teeth. "We don't do anything. We get a full assessment of the situation now." He turned to his second-in-command, Lakar, a being of immense stature, whose calm demeanor had earned him Zirek's trust. "Lakar, take charge of the fleet. We need to know exactly how many ships Earth has launched, and I want every single one of them accounted for." Lakar nodded, his sharp features reflecting both determination and concern. "At once, sire." Zirek watched him leave the chamber, and then turned to the main screen. The ships above Earth were still there, their forms growing larger by the second. Cloaked as they were, they didn't appear to have the size and firepower of the Empire's armada, but something about them, the way they moved, the calculated precision, made Zirek's gut twist. These ships were different. He approached the observation panel, his fingers hovering over the control buttons. He needed more information. He needed to understand what kind of technology these humans were using. There had to be a logical explanation, a way to dismiss this as a fluke. But when he began to analyze the data, his heart sank. The ships weren't just cloaked, they were invisible to his most sophisticated detection systems. It was as though they had mastered technology that had been thought impossible, technology that the Empire had only dreamed of. The humans had been hiding something, and Zirek had no idea what it was. "Captain, we've got an issue." Lieutenant Sienna interrupted, her voice urgent. "The enemy's heavy fleet is closing in. We're going to be surrounded if we don't act quickly." Cole's mind raced. They had anticipated this move, but it was happening faster than expected. The Alien Council had more reinforcements than they had accounted for, and their desperation was evident. The fight for survival had become a fight for dominance, and humanity would not back down. "Deploy the EEI reserve fleet," Cole ordered. "Have them flank the enemy's reinforcements. We need to hit them from all sides." The human fleet's secondary ships, previously held back in reserve, moved into position, circling the alien heavy fleet from all angles. The alien ships were now caught in a pincer, surrounded by the full might of humanity's remaining forces. The alien fleet was losing its grip on the battlefield, and the sheer ferocity of humanity's counterattack was breaking them. Cole watched as another massive alien warship exploded in a burst of fire and debris. The force of the explosion sent shockwaves through the surrounding ships, destabilizing their formations. One by one, the alien ships fell. Some fled, while others were consumed in flames. The once proud fleet of the Alien Council was no more. "All remaining units prepare for the final push," Cole ordered, his voice cold and relentless. "This ends now." The human ships converged on the last remnants of the alien fleet. There was no more strategy, no more tactics. This was pure, unrelenting destruction. The alien ships had no chance. Their weapons were too weak, their shields too brittle. Humanity's rage had become their weapon, and nothing would stop them. As the last alien ship disintegrated in a fiery explosion, the silence that followed was deafening. The battlefield was now empty, save for the wreckage of what had once been the Alien Council's proud fleet. Commander Cole stood in the center of the bridge, his expression unchanged, his eyes hard with the weight of the battle. "We've won," Sienna said softly, the tension in her voice slowly fading. "It's over." Cole nodded. "Not yet," Not until every last one of them knows who we are. He turned to face his crew, his voice carrying the weight of their victory. This battle was just the beginning. We've shown them that humanity is not to be erased. We will rise again and we will take what is ours. The galaxy has forgotten us, but we are here to remind them. Let's make sure they never forget again. And, with that, the human fleet continued its path through the galaxy, leaving behind nothing but the remnants of an empire that had dared to forget them. The quiet hum of the Eclipse's engines filled the bridge, a stark contrast to the chaotic sounds of battle that had just subsided. The fleet had won, but the price of victory weighed heavily on every soul aboard. Commander Elias Cole stood at the front of the bridge, staring at the stars ahead, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. They had shattered the alien fleet. They had exacted revenge, but there was no joy in it, no elation, only a cold sense of fulfillment, one that felt more like duty than triumph. "Commander," Sienna's voice broke through his thoughts. She had come to stand beside him, her face still pale from the intensity of the battle. "The enemy fleet is in full retreat. We've secured the sector. They're scrambling to reassemble their forces, but it's too late. Their council is decimated." Cole nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on the dark void outside. The galaxy was still silent, as if it were in shock from the brutality of humanity's resurgence. "Did they believe they could erase us so easily?" Cole muttered, more to himself than to Sienna. "Did they think we would vanish without a trace like some myth lost to time?" "They did," Sienna replied softly. "And they paid the price for it." "Yes," Cole said quietly, his gaze hardening. "But this is only the beginning." Across the galaxy, the news of humanity's return spread like wildfire. The alien races that had once dismissed Earth as a forgotten, insignificant planet now understood the truth. Humanity was not extinct. Humanity had been hiding, waiting, and now they were back, more powerful than ever before. The alien council's once proud empire had crumbled under the weight of their own arrogance. What had begun as a small skirmish, a retaliation, a need for revenge, had turned into an overwhelming display of humanity's technological might, their will to survive, and their unshakable resolve. The alien races that had laughed at humanity's primitive technology, that had seen Earth as nothing more than a footnote in galactic history, were now scrambling to prepare for the consequences of their mistake. But it was too late. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of Earth, and it would never forget. Inside the council chamber, the surviving members of the alien races gathered in an emergency session, their once confident faces now stricken with fear and uncertainty. The walls trembled as their warships were still under repair, the systems they had once trusted failing under the might of humanity's superior technology. Vrixen, the leader of the council, stood at the head of the room, his once commanding presence now diminished. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking as he grasped the table before him. We were wrong," he muttered, his voice low. "The humans are not a myth. They are real, and they are unstoppable." Quelth, the insectoid commander, hissed angrily, his pincers clicking in agitation. "We underestimated them. We believed their technology was primitive, that they could never challenge us, but we were wrong." Yawen, the Shaltor representative, her form flickering with the light of her fluid structure, spoke with an air of solemnity. "It is not just their technology, it is their spirit. They fought for survival, for the right to exist, and now they have returned, not as a broken species, but as a force of nature." Vrixen's eyes narrowed. "Then we must prepare. We have no choice but to retaliate. The humans cannot be allowed to go unchecked. They will destroy everything we have worked for." "But how?" Yawen's voice trembled. "Their technology is far beyond ours now. We can't defeat them in open combat." Quelth growled, his eyes narrowing in calculation. "We fight smarter then. We wait. We gather our forces. We use the very mistake we made to our advantage. We underestimated them, but we won't make that mistake again." Back aboard the Eclipse, Cole stared at the comm screens, his face grim. The battle was over, but the war was far from it. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species and empires, each with its own agenda. Earth's return had shaken the foundations of galactic politics, and the response from the Alien Council was inevitable. "They'll come for us," Cole said, quietly, his voice filled with resolve. "The galaxy won't let this go. They'll regroup, rebuild, and come back to finish what they started." Sienna nodded, her expression hardening. "We expected that. The question is, what do we do next?" Cole turned to her, his eyes steely with determination. "We don't just defend ourselves, we take the fight to them. We show them that humanity is not just a species to be erased. We are the future, and anyone who stands in our way will feel the full force of Earth's vengeance." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "We are no longer a myth. The galaxy will remember us, and from now on they will fear us." Across the galaxy, the Alien Council's members were already making their plans, desperate to reclaim their lost power. They knew they had been beaten in battle, but they also knew that this was not the end. The humans had returned, but the aliens were not finished. They would not rest until humanity was again driven to the edge of extinction. But the galaxy had changed. The balance of power had shifted, and the universe now had to reckon with the fact that humanity was no longer an insignificant species, wiped from the records and forgotten by the stars. Humanity had returned, and they were ready to fight for their place in the cosmos. On the bay, Eclipse, Cole stood on the bridge, staring at the stars once again. But now those stars no longer seemed so distant. They were within reach. The galaxy, once so vast and intimidating, now felt like a battlefield, a place where humanity could rise and take its place among the most powerful civilizations. "We've made our mark," Cole said, his voice calm but filled with the promise of what was to come. "And we won't stop until we have everything we deserve." Sienna glanced at him, her expression hardening with resolve. "We've just begun, sir. There's more to this than just revenge. Humanity has a future now. A future among the stars." Cole turned his gaze back to the infinite expanse before them. "Yes," he said quietly, "and we will make sure that future is ours." The Eclipse surged forward into the galaxy, humanity's flag held high, and the knowledge that their time had come, no longer forgotten, no longer underestimated. They were back, and this time they would leave their mark on the galaxy. Forever.